So just like every 4020 TV venture, as we try something different, we stick out an invite on Twitter. Maybe I should have made the invite public to people rather than asking them to message us. But here we are, a gang of 5 people have turned up. Phil has to, because he does, and 3 people, 2 of which are in one box, have come here to talk rugby league on the edge of the new season.
I'm very surprised at that, Richard, actually. I just thought you'd have got a phenomenal response. I thought the hard part would be choosing who to allow.
Well, I mean, I think they're all watching Andrew Johns' debut for Warrington, which is on Sky Sports as we record this. And it reminds me that Atlantic Solutions used to be a thing. This is going to be great, all these old games where you think, what did ever happen to Pro Biz? Where did they go?
I know.
Yeah.
Raised eyebrow.
I saw the Broncos Canberra game on Saturday with the in the World's, what was it called?
The World Club Championship.
World Club Championship, yeah. And about 6 or 7 of that Canberra team became top class coaches, which is really interesting. Just shows the caliber of the team that they put out that day. People like Ricky Stewart, David Furner, Mal Meninga. Laurie Daly, it's phenomenal.
Laurie Daly is coming. They should bring that back, that World Championship thing, because that was a great success, Phil. As we celebrate 25 years of Super League, that's one of the great things we got from it.
It'll be reviewed in years to come as a concept, like so much in rugby league, that was worthy of doing properly that we didn't quite. It was something we weren't ready for, but as an idea, it has some merit and still does. And I think, clearly the opening games of our champions being beaten by their lowest teams denied it any credibility. But the idea of the best of each hemisphere taking each other on a more regular basis is something that we should have pursued and didn't. And having been old enough to report on some of it, including Down Under, for which it's an experience I'll always be grateful for, it was a missed opportunity.
Yes. But how many times have we said that, Phil?
Well, only for the last 125 years. So there
is yes. And you in particular, probably for most of them, yeah.
How's London, Ron? How are you excited for the brand new season, Dan? I mean, we spoke to the Scholars a few weeks ago, and they seem very upbeat about things. But the Broncos haven't got a home yet.
Well, they have. They've just got a choice of homes. That's all. It's like a politician. It's a really interesting one. Of course, everybody's looking forward to the new season, and started off well against Keighley on Saturday. But this will be the 3rd different London side in 3 years, and that's one of the consequences of promotion and relegation. But what happens is, you build a side. Once you get promoted to Super League, you've got about 3 weeks to build a side and enhance a successful championship side, which is not really long enough, is it? Let's be honest. But we did, and did perform way beyond capabilities, notably against Wakefield, Richard, I seem to recall. Except in one match, which was the only one that mattered. Last match of the season. Yeah. I often wonder what would have happened had London won that match. Things might have been very different.
You'd have been host of this show.
I probably would.
I would have had a different employment record over the past 12 months.
Yeah. So, and then of course, what happens? And I think any team that's promoted who then gets relegated will have this problem. The other sides who are far better resourced through the Sky money will look at who did well in your team and then go for them. I mean, Alex Walker, Jay Pitts, Eddie Batty, Richard, to say one thing, but some of the guys got sent to some really successful clubs, and so we had to start all over again for last season, which of course didn't last very long. And then some of those moved on as well. So I believe in the game against Keighley on Saturday, there were 7 debuts, which is quite phenomenal, really. But obviously they're all high quality, and we're looking forward to seeing them. I think it's an important season in London. It's an important season in London because we have to rebuild from relegation. We have to do it extremely effectively because the people in London will watch a game where the side is doing well. It represents the city. It's been talked about well on TV and in social media. And that's how you build awareness and how you build crowds, because you can't rely on cradle to grave, community spirit in a place like London. And I have to say that I think West Wales will find that. Coventry Bears will find that. Newcastle Thunder will find that. So long as they're successful, they'll get a hardcore of people who want to follow them. But when they're not, you're left with the hardcore.
Now, speaking of places, London have a choice of homes. Hull have a home, and now we're talking about building a new home, which is odd when they've got a very nice home. Karen, Hull, new coach, Goldfish Bowl, pressure, disappointment over the years. What's going to happen to Hull FC this year?
Who knows? And that's the problem, isn't it? You can say. I think the one thing I am positive about this year is that we do still have the mass core of our team. We haven't really had many movements. The players that have left have been like Gaz, naturally. I mean, he strung his retirement out something rotten, didn't he?
Like Frank Sinatra.
I think it's definitely his time. Looking at some of the ways he was recovering at the end of games last season, I think he's ready for retirement now. He's quite happy on the coaching side, I think, now. I think the one player we are desperately going to miss and is the one that's kicking it up in Bristol at the moment, that's Ratto.
Or
Seaver as he is down there. I don't know why they've changed his name all of a sudden.
Rebranding.
I'm actually wondering if they've actually managed to learn how to spell his surname, because it wasn't spelled correctly on his first couple of shirts, which we found hilarious. We're going to miss Ratto. We're going to miss his speed, because if there's one thing that we don't have is major speed. We've got Adam Swift. Shaw obviously is injured. He was someone that had speed, but apart from that, we don't really have many players that once they've gone, and I think that could be where we struggle on our wings, especially if we've got players against us that do make the break. Are we catching them? So that could be the big issue, but only time will tell, won't it?
Geez, it's about 20 years ago. Well, it will be 20 years ago that I would have been going out student night, Wakefield, and you see all the stars of Rugby League there. The Paul brothers.
The March brothers.
The March brothers weren't out. But Gareth Ellis was out on a Monday night. And he would frequently tell us how bad Wakefield had played the night before. Because he was honest about things. Matt, you've been and watched a Rugby League game this week. You've been at the thick of the action.
I've managed to watch 2 this year so far. So
Ooh.
I was at Whitehaven on Saturday night. Fantastic game. I love going up to Cumbria. The people love the game. They're so passionate about it. And even with 10 directors watching, they were still making a racket, getting on the referee's back. And they're just so into it. It was really good. I held my hands up. I made a boo-boo on Saturday night. I thought it was a yellow card that Callum got. In fact, it was red. We got told at half-time.
Did you get slagged off on social media or something? Because I'm too cheap to have paid to watch these games, that's all.
No, I've done all right. I've managed to escape quite most of it. I think the biggest bugbear has been for the Hour League games is not noticing the 6 again being waved by the referees. But fortunately, even in both games with Earl last week at Huddersfield and with Ian Rooney at Whitehaven on Saturday, we've managed to spot them and make sure people were aware.
How have you found the exciting new rules then while you've been watching things?
It doesn't really make a lot of difference. You will find that most teams will go to centre field for a restart because then it gives them that option to split the defence. And you noticed on Saturday night quite a lot that for a centre field restart, you'll have your 2 markers, they'll split 5 and 5, and then you've got your fullback. I'm not really I would like to see some teams try from 10 metres in from touch, just to give them that width to go with, to see if any of the coaches have actually got anything up their sleeve to practice something like that.
Obviously, you're part of this exciting new phenomenon of people paying to watch rugby league on TV, which has been going on since, well, technically since the BBC started, because you have to pay to watch them. People don't realise that. And Sky, we've been paying for 30 years to watch rugby league on Sky. Now people have to pay a whole fiver, if they're early enough to watch rugby league games. And some people are happy, which is odd, because I just tweeted a thing earlier today. If you want to, ice hockey have set up this brand new tournament, which is completely made up, and they've had to sign squads from scratch, because obviously when the season was postponed earlier this year, everyone was, put on furlough or releasing their contracts or whatever. And they're charging, I think the cheapest you can get is £6 a game, but that's with a cost of you're paying for them all at once, 24 games, which includes teams that are not yours. £5 is not bad to watch some live rugby league, is it?
No, it's very good value. But you have to do the early bird to get the £5. It's 10 if you don't. You can get the weekend pass for £20, but that I think will come in when the championship or season starts. But 5 games for £20 is pretty good value. It's interesting that you can actually watch your side, home and away, a £5 a week, and that doesn't seem such a bad deal to me. That seems a really good initiative.
That's the point I was going to make. It's a £5 to sit at home and watch your team play. It's a £10 on game day. You think going to a game, you've got to get to the stadium, fuel. You've got to get through the gate. Super League, £20 minimum even to stand up.
At least, and the rest.
Then you've got your beer. Then you've got your food. You're spending upwards of £50.
You can't get a pint in London for a £5. That's a bag of crisps, isn't it?
No, you might get a lemonade for that, but nothing more. Don't ask for a Guinness for a £5 either. Actually, I take your point, but to me, what I've missed more than anything is not just the rugby, but actually the social interaction between fans and, many of whom you only see at games, but they do become friends. And the game is what you have in common, and people get very passionate about it. And you can have social media groups and so on, but it's not the same as having a beer, watching the game, and then having a good moan about it when the game is finished in the bar afterwards. And I just feel that that's just part of this shared experience that everybody is missing.
There's a very important point here, though, on the back of that, because it's absolutely right. But also there needs to be more tolerance, because I think the one thing we can say going into this season is there's never been more variables for every club. So form is going out the window. The amount of training that clubs have been able to do, the fitness of players, the change in the rules, the fixture list itself, which is ridiculously onerous. People cannot read too much into pre-season results, into what might happen in the first couple of rounds that are played at neutral venues. If we are going to really enjoy the season ahead, we have to be more tolerant. We can't have all the abuse that's going on in other sports into the players that happen to come onto social media, match officials. There needs to be an awareness that even if our club doesn't play as well as we would like it to, there are so many extenuating circumstances for the year 2021. We have to make allowances. So before a ball is kicked, the appeal, particularly I think of the ethos of what we've been trying to bring on 4020 over the years, is just enjoy it. We haven't had it for a year. We missed it. We missed it hugely. We'll enjoy it more when fans are allowed in grounds and people can talk about being there. And I think Matt will confirm as well that even if you get the privilege of watching a game in a stadium or on a screen with no atmosphere, it's not the same. No. It really is very, very hard because you feed off all of that kind of thing. So if your team drops a ball or a referee makes a mistake, just enjoy it for what it is, because this is going to be, again, a very transitional season for every club.
I think that will be the case, Phil, in the early days, where people will have missed the game so much and missed, miss the shared experience so much that they will be just happy to be there. But this is rugby league, my friend, and moaning is part of the fabric of the game. But it will come back. I mean, with all the best will in the world, if your team is not performing to their best, you will have a word to say, and I can guarantee it. But nonetheless, just this joy to be back will, I think, carry us through for quite a long time. If the team's doing well as well, then fantastic.
And what's most noticeable about the games behind closed doors and being in a stadium is you hear everything on the pitch as well. You hear the hit, you hear the wind being knocked out of somebody in a big hit. I remember being at Headingley last year one night, and James Graham, all you heard, it was the Saints game, and all you heard was James Graham, whether he was encouraging his teammates from the sideline, encouraging his teammates on the pitch, or even sledging the opposition as well. You heard absolutely everything, and you do get quite an insight from being in that empty stadium and actually hearing what's going on the pitch. That's probably the only benefit of being in an empty stadium, but it is so. The first time I did it was actually quite spooky, especially being in such a big ground as Headingley and nobody being there. I mean, granted, you could say it was like being at a rugby union game at Headingley, but it was actually less than that.
I think that's one thing I really enjoyed last year was that Hull puts on highlights videos after each game. And obviously you could hear everything. You could hear the players talking to each other, as Matt says, encouraging each other, even having a go at each other if something went wrong. And one thing I really liked was there was one Sky game last year where the background false noise that they put on failed.
It was the cup match.
And I actually sent you were there, weren't you? And I actually sent a message to Matt and saying, tell them to leave it, because it was fantastic, because you could hear everything. And that's one thing they've done in the football. They've given you the option to either listen to the fake noise or actually just listen to the game. And that's the beauty of rugby league. There is the massive hits. That's what we like about the amateur game, where you stood at the sidelines watching Saddleworth Rangers and you'll literally hear every single hit and you're there going, oh, that hurts.
And every single swear word.
Yeah, and every single
swear word. I did enjoy Matt Newsom's almost not even apology yesterday for the industrial language between West Wales and Widnes. I thought, the people who are watching this do not care. It's like when they do it on the boxing at 10 o'clock at night, someone's sworn, you think, it's 10 o'clock at night, it's boxing.
Yeah.
Who do you think your audience is?
Yeah.
There was one stage on Saturday at Whitehaven where they decided to listen into James. And before the two captains got there, I actually said on air, if there's anything industrial, we apologise in advance. So I got in there before anything happened, to be honest.
I mean, swearing is so common on TV now, isn't it? I mean, just chat shows. You get the F word and all kinds of stuff on chat shows. The last leg that Adam Hills does, there's loads of swearing on that.
Post-game, you'll find, especially if it's been like a last-minute drop goal or something like that, the players are so pumped up and you go and stick a microphone under their nose. What do you expect them to do?
Make money for Rugby League.
Make money for Rugby League cares, yeah. But it's when they apologise for it, and I'm like, and I look at my clock and it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but if your child is still up at 10 o'clock at night watching it, the chances are they used to stand next to you at the rugby, and they've heard it all before.
Absolutely.
When did my kids learn to swear? In the stands at the rugby next to the mother. Don't apologise. Just get on with it.
It was a shame that they didn't have the fake crowd noise at Featherstone yesterday when they lost the feed, because that would have been great to hear them cheering the test card. But sadly, that was not the case. And I don't know. It was nice to have Rugby League back this weekend, wasn't it? And teams who I've never seen West Wales play before. And the Gavin Henson sideshow and Featherstone and Bradford was a good old-fashioned battle.
It wasn't just the case that Rugby League was back. It was that Championship Rugby League was back, where there's very little TV coverage. So to get Championship teams on there, was I think, a great advert for the Championship because, I watched 3 games over the weekend and I enjoyed them all.
Especially the fact that the Championship didn't come back last year.
Exactly.
At least Super League came back, so we did have rugby up to the end of November. I think the Championship clubs have done absolutely phenomenally well to get through COVID in the first place and to actually come out the other side. Obviously, I watched our game against York the other Thursday. York were blooming good value for it. They're really and they're going to be a cracking side. So
we'll see next Saturday about that.
A lot of the Championship clubs are chomping at the bit for Super League, and it's
they are.
They're not happy to be in the Championship. They want that seen as the holy grail of being in Super League.
Here's the thing that's really interesting. There's no guaranteed passport into Super League. There's lots of different strategies you can adopt. Like I remember, Lee and Hull KR, when they were in the Championship, just brought in loads and loads and loads of experienced players. And just by dint of experience, kind of won some tight matches. But when London were promoted, they actually had quite an experienced side, but they had a big youth setup as well, which gave that first choice experience side a lot of backup. And that's the route the club have decided to go to now. And if you look at Wigan or St Helens or Leeds in their heyday, the bulk of their side was local boys who came through their systems, knew each other intimately, and were able to play together as a team under pressure, rather than just bringing in, like 13 new players and who all have decent CVs, but not all of them are going to get on. So it's an interesting strategy that you have to adopt. Am I just going to buy experience, or am I actually going to build from within? And I know Newcastle are doing this as well, that they're building from within. They're bringing in loads of local players, being very patient with them.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that patience will pay off.
Yeah, it might take that little bit longer, but they'll get there.
Yeah, you've also outlined the blueprint for the season this year, particularly in Super League, that because of the onus put on the players with the schedule, it is going to be the teams with the greatest depth and the best youngsters that are going to survive. And I think, having looked at all the predictions of various people, because we can say what we like at the moment and can't be proved wrong, the top 4, the middle 4 and the bottom 4 seem to be containing the same clubs, maybe in a slightly different order. So it's almost as if that template has been set for where we think clubs are. But I think you can't do any of that with any degree of certainty at the moment. But the clubs with the best youth policies and who have been prepared to invest in it when they didn't have to, and who have the greatest squad depth, are the ones that are going to be there at the end rather than at the beginning.
Yep, I quite agree with that, Phil. What's interesting, if you're one of the lower clubs or you're one of the Championship clubs with a good setup, what happens is when those young lads start to do well and start to appear in your first team, or maybe get picked for England youth or whatever it is, along comes Warrington, Wigan, St Helens, say, he looks good. We'll bring him over to our club. And we've suffered from that tremendously. We had people like Rob Butler, who played for England Knights, played at Headingley against Jamaica, playing for Warrington this season. Kai Pearce-Paul played for England Academy 2 years ago. Gave a lot of the Wigan players in that team, a really good impression of him. So Wigan signed him. And that's the problem, that these guys should be playing for your team, not, if they show some promise, go and play for somebody else. But what do you do about it? I don't know.
The bigger problem, though, is once those players have signed them, they have to play them. And my worry is that in 3 years, when they've only played a handful of first-team games, they then get released. So if you're going to sign them, there has to be a commitment to developing them and playing them. And you look at somebody like Lewis Biernick, who's, just left Hull. And, when he was at London, he had the potential to be something, and he wasn't allowed to fulfil that potential in London. He was picked off, but then he was dropped in an environment that he probably wasn't ready for at the time, didn't fulfil that potential, didn't ever really play and given the opportunity to play, and has been moved on again. And that's where I think we don't get it right.
No, I quite agree.
That balance is out.
Yeah.
I think for me, though, that what I have really blamed a lot of this for the lack of youth coming through, and in a lot of clubs, is the complete disregard for a strong academy. If you look back to the 80s and the 90s when you had the alliance, that structure of a proper youth setup, now it's too easy to ship them off to other clubs. To me, you were talking earlier about your youth coming through. The youth want to pull on. I'd like to think our youth want to pull on the black and white. They want to wear the black and white. They don't want to wear the blue and yellow of Doncaster.
I know.
The youth of Leeds want to wear this badge. They don't want to wear Featherstones. and I think that's where we are failing. We are woefully behind the times when it comes to looking after our youth and building an alliance side, an academy side that can move up to the first team.
Yes, absolutely. Quite agree.
I remember when Kirk Eamon got dropped and he was sent to Doncaster. He was that close to walking away because all Eamon wanted to do was wear the black and white. He didn't want to wear a Doncaster shirt. As it happened, he got in. A player got injured, he came back in, and by heck, he had the best season I've ever seen him have because he knew he had to prove himself and keep that spot.
And that's the positive part of it. You couldn't do anything with that dog, could you, by the way?
Oh. He's in another room.
He's the most enthusiastic audience member we've ever had.
It's like I'm in SCO here. Matt,
making more sense, to be fair.
Yes, and better predictions.
Matt, now you don't have to pretend to be a Warrington fan, sadly, for financial reasons. What are A, Warrington, is it their year? B, what are they going to do when Darryl Powell and everyone else joins them next year?
It's not Warrington's year. It never is. And I don't know about the Darryl Powell thing. I just find it really weird the way the two clubs have worded it. So Castleford was definitely a case of the club and Darryl, but Warrington was more of a Steve has decided. So you would get the feeling that Warrington wanted to keep Steve Price at the end of his contract this year. You get the feeling that Darryl Powell's now going to be coaching this year with one arm behind his back and somebody's there with the big punch bag on the stick, ready to just go if things aren't going right midway through the year.
The problem at Warrington's expectations are always sky high, mainly because of the sort of money they pay and the stars they sign and so on. And it's a very difficult balance to get. Their youth system needs to be greatly improved. They need to invest far more money investing in young talent rather than... I appreciate Greg Inglis is a great PR signing and everybody's looking forward to seeing him. But they're signing him about 5 years too late. And there's rumours going around that he's not in the best physical condition either. He's got a few little niggles that's worrying him. So why don't they to go to that next step, make some judicious signings as they've always done, but actually build from within, build their own. How many lads in the Warrington first team have come through their systems? I can think of Phil Bin and a couple of others, but not many at all.
The classic example, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes, is Declan Patton, who, of course, we all forget played in a grand final as a young kid coming through the Warrington system and was dispensed with. So it'd be really interesting to see how he goes at
yeah, absolutely.
And I think you're right. You were talking about models of development, and if Warrington have an Achilles heel, it's that they've never really had, in this modern era, the depth and the time to blood their own youth. Yeah. They bought youth from other clubs and then again moved it on, and it's not the way to get success over a long period of time.
To be fair to Warrington, though, we did see some of their youth players at the back end of last season when they played midweek before the Cup semi-final. You had the likes of Nathan Roebuck, Connor Wrench, and those. But some of these lads have now gone out on loan. Josh Hewlis, Ellis Robson, Riley Dean. Riley Dean's at York for the year now, isn't he, on loan? So they, to be fair to Warrington, through the 6 years I was covering them on the radio, they did put a lot into their youth system, and it is a lot better. They're in a lot better place than they were.
But they're not getting the opportunity. Riley Dean should be playing for Warrington, not for York. If they believe he's got the talent, they should be patient with him and give him the time to develop, not farm him out to York because York's halfback got injured. And that's the difference.
You've also got the flip side, which is what I was saying earlier. Where do they play? Where do they keep their match fitness up? Where do they learn the game? If there isn't an academy
or reserves,
they've got to go out. Otherwise, they're not going to get any game time and they're not going to develop. You can only play 17 players per week.
Yes, but that's where you have to have an academy. You have to have a reserve side for the very reasons you're suggesting.
Yeah.
So dropping the reserve side, I think, should have been the last resort, not the first thing that they do to save money.
I agree.
That to me was a big error.
Well, that's going to come home to roost this season because those that haven't will be towards the bottom of the league, and those that have will be nearer the top.
Yeah.
I can see the time is running out on us, so I'm going to judge this as being a success. If the dogs are anything to go by, I mean, Ian is still there. He's watching, but he's making his tea. That's why he's not going involved.
The funny thing is, Ian's contribution has been the best of all.
Yeah, he's our best audience member. I think this is. I'm glad Karen's turned up, just so it wasn't just for. Middle-aged white men talking rugby league, which is a general thing in our sport, but there you go. Yeah. And only two.
Phil, I'm sorry, Phil. I wanted to ask you. If we haven't got time, I'm sorry we can't discuss it. But I'm really interested in your visionary views about where you see the future of rugby league in the next 20 years, given all that's gone on and given the growth of other sports. If you look at what Sky are doing now with netball and what they're doing with women's soccer, and in rugby union, you've got the WXV that's just about to start, which is women's international football. Where's our relevance? Where do we fit into this?
Well, there's an obvious edit point there, because you notice Ron's disappeared because we ran out of time, and then Matt said, just set up the link again. I was like, that's a way of getting around paying Zoom, isn't it? That's good. It's a rugby league thing. So, Phil, where's rugby league going to be in 20 years' time? I think that was Ron's question, but I've shortened it down somewhat.
I suspect that is an episode on its own, to be honest. The only thing you can say is that this is a pretty critical year among all the critical years we've had in the 120-odd we've been going, because the television deal needs renegotiating, which apparently will be announced in the not too distant future and won't be too dissimilar to what everybody is expecting. There has to be a change in the way the sport is viewed. Clearly, the media landscape is changing, but also how it's consumed. There has to be an appeal to younger people. There is a nines format that we've never properly developed that I think we need to. All the questions we've always asked have not been answered. And we can ask them again ad infinitum. But the truth is, it's within our keep to decide what we want to be, what our identity is, how we reconcile full-time and part-time rugby league, how many players are coming through at the very bottom of the pyramid that will determine what the top looks like. And it is the year anniversary of writing a piece about the need for perhaps the NRL and Super League to have some kind of synergy that doesn't exist at the moment now, whether that is driven by corporate finance, whether it's an expansion policy of the stronger arm, whether it's Super League realising that it can't just be what it's always been. Those sort of talks really have to happen now. And I think something that Brian Noble has consistently said in his monthly column in 4020 is that whatever decisions are made have to be pretty radical. We can't play around at the fringes for too much longer and change a rule or Look at, bringing in another chief executive. We have to get the governance right. We have to decide what the plan is going to be for the next 3, 5, 10 years. And we have to decide and have the confidence to decide, are we going to be a big minority sport, or are we going to be a smaller fish, but in the bigger global pool? Interestingly, reading a lot of stuff again about, this is the 25-year anniversary of when Super League came in, and the realization then that the sporting world and the whole of society was going global. And we had an opportunity to put a foot on that path, and we haven't really taken it. We talked in the earlier part of the program about the World Club Championship, which has been widely derided. But actually, that was the first step on the road to globalization. We weren't ready for it, but it showed you perhaps where we should have been looking at and not where we now currently are. So with a long-winded answer of I don't know to a question that deserves probably 50 minutes, an hour, and some real specialist discussion. There are blueprints out there that people are working on what the game could look like in the future. At the moment, they have nowhere to place those plans because the game isn't ready to accept them. And we need to decide whether we're happy watching the kind of rugby league we're watching at the moment, and it will become predominantly a part-time sport. The best players will go and play where most of the money is, which inevitably is Australia if we don't do something about it. Whether we want to develop new markets like North America, which again, we tickled the tummy of and ran away. And all of that is within our gift, but there has to be visionaries that are going to drive it. And that's the bit none of us know.
Well, I'm looking for the visionaries who run clubs in the Championship and League One, who put together a package and go to the RFL. Ron's coming back. You answer these questions. Ron's coming back now.
He'll have to watch the broadcast.
He will have to watch and listen to the podcast and all the other things. The visionaries in the Championship and League One who now can see. Ron's back. We've answered your question, Ron. So you have to go listen to the podcast.
You're a genius.
These visionaries who run clubs in the Championship and League One, and those are the RFL, who, as Ron mentioned, there's this big TV deal for women's Super League football, which has been announced today. And how can they put together some kind of package which says, well, look, we get bigger crowds than most of these teams in your competition. Can we have some money, please, to show our games on TV? And this is where, Matt's commentating on games, Cam's been at games, Phil's been at games. We've been pushing women's rugby league because we could see that the way the media landscape was going with pushing women's sport, it was obvious that we had to do that ourselves. And I'm not sure everyone necessarily got that, but.
I mean, Ron can get the gist of the 10-minute answer he just missed to the question he just asked. But the truth is, a lot of it is about image. And the reason why people are paying money for women's sport at the moment, it has a vibrancy about it. It has there's a new inquisitive audience. And I would, again, go back to something we discussed on the programme maybe last week or the week before about what netball are doing. They don't have to be on Sky showing every game, but if you want to watch it on YouTube and you want to watch some slightly pared down production values, but still get the excitement of what's going on, you want to appeal to a different audience, then you have to change your image. And our image, whether we like it or not, is still stuck in the days of big men in the mud, in the winter with Eddie Waring commentating. And we've allowed that to be the perception of what we are. We know that there are some wonderful athletes playing this sport. We also know that other sports people have recognised how wonderful our athletes are, but we haven't done anything to promote them. And most of the build-up for this current season, which I'm sure we'll go on and give our foolish predictions as to how it might look, are based around what suits are saying, not promoting the players. So we have to. The short answer again to a long question, which Ron will get to see at a later date, is it's in our gift to be whatever we want to be, but we've got to know what we want to be, and we don't.
Yes, but we already do know what we want to be, but not everybody is bought into it, and nobody, in my view, owns it. Somebody needs to own the future direction of this game and say, this is what this game is going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years' time. This is where the game is going to be played. I'm not interested in the details of how the game's going to be played because we needn't tinker too much with the game. It's fine as it is. The closer rugby union gets to copying rugby league is almost a backhanded compliment. What we need is direction. We need vision, but also we need buy-in from everybody. And I don't just mean Wigan, Saints and Leeds. I mean the Championship clubs, the League One clubs, the community clubs, the women's game. Everybody needs to buy into the direction that rugby league needs to go. And one of the reasons why there's such an air of pessimism at the moment is that rugby league just comes across as very insular. Phil, I'll be happy to take you along the streets of London at some time, talking to sports fans and ask them their views of rugby league, because I know you're a thinker about the game, so it won't surprise you too much, but it will a lot of people just how rugby league is regarded. We all know it's a treasure, but unfortunately, it's hidden treasure. It's a hidden gem. I used to call it a diamond wrapped in brown paper because it's not coming across like a diamond. Somebody needs to own that problem. That was the challenge for Robert Elston.
But it will come with external corporate investment, but they will then tell you what they want, and we've got to be ready for that.
Will they be wrong, though? Will they be wrong? Supposing they said, right, okay, you want our money. I want a team in most major cities in this country, either at Super League or Championship level. Right?
The plan. What
are you going to do about it?
Well, but the plan exists. It's just the people that can execute that plan are not in a position to make it. And that's because the club's power is too much. Yes. If there is an upside to what has been a terrible year, not least in terms of the tragic loss of life, it's been that the clubs are slightly disenfranchised at the moment because they don't have money. Now is a really, really good time to say you give up your right to have a say. We'll listen, but you give up your right to have the absolute right of determining the direction of the sport. You are a cog in it, a very, very important one. But if you want this amount of money, which you need to survive, these are conditions you'll get it for. And I think we are approaching that if we are open-minded enough. And as we said earlier, when you were just logging back in again, it's a year ago since a piece was written about becoming more conjoined with the NRL. That's becoming slightly more likely by virtue of the economics of the situation. Yes. Now, there needs to be a drive that says that is actually the direction of travel we want to go in.
And I would love to see a Peter V'landys type figure in this country. Someone who, I know the opinions vary about him in Australia, but he is the boss. He tells you what's going to happen, and he'll take responsibility for making it happen.
But he's advised.
That's what we need.
He's also advised by some people that not only fully understand the sport, but know what is acceptable and what isn't to the power brokers within that. He's a figurehead. And one of the things we are really missing at the moment is someone who will speak out for the sport.
Yes.
And that's where he is more. It's not that he gets every decision right and rides roughshod. He couldn't do it without the backup and support of the people behind him. We haven't got that unanimity of the direction that we're going in. But it's there. It's just finding the right avenue, and it will come with finance attached to it that determines where we go.
But who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for putting this together?
I think those plans already exist in various different places. It's just that the stars haven't aligned yet. But there are people out there that are talking about this.
Do you think the breakaway of Super League has hindered that?
I do. I definitely do. I think it looked insular. It looks self-interested. It looked self-obsessed. It looks, it's a kind of, if you're one of the clubs that perennially struggling, it looked like a lifeline somehow to make sure you stay at the top table. But that's not just me saying that. That's how it appears to sports fans generally. You might watch the odd game of rugby league.
And broadcast.
We've got an amazing product. We know we've got an amazing product. But unfortunately, I don't think we advertise it well enough. One thing that springs to mind is on Twitter. Couple of months ago, that rugby union try in the corner.
Yeah, Johnny May.
That try got absolutely slated because every single reply, if you look, every single reply was, well, you see that every week in Rugby League.
But do you know what was missed? The fact that Eddie Jones complimented Rugby League and said that Johnny May had been honing his technique by watching. So instead of getting a chip on our shoulder bigger than we normally do,
we
but we needed somebody who works within the sport to accentuate what we do and not allow just the chatter of social media to overtake that. And that's where a Volandis type figure is important.
I quite agree.
And that is within us to do that. And,
yes.
And I, again, if we just say we've got a great game and you don't understand it, it's like the whole phrase, the greatest game. It's not ours to bestow on Rugby League. Somebody can tell you you've got the greatest game, but if you tell them you've got it and they don't see it, then you're actually excluding them before they've even had the chance to come and view it. So, yeah, I am slightly more confident that what's happened this year has taken away a little bit of the power, which is why, if you like, the Super League administration, as it was under Robert Elson, has collapsed a little bit. The most disappointing thing of all of that is it was already written in history, that we'd seen that around 2000, that it doesn't work. And you could understand some of the reasons why Super League wanted more self-determination of some areas of their own competition. But the breakaway and the animosity that went with it, and the disenfranchising of other people around it meant that it was only ever seen as a hostile move.
Yeah.
And that's where we went wrong.
Yeah.
Could you imagine, though, if we had a Peter Volandis type figure here in the UK? We're playing 25 games in Super League this year is too many. Phil, I know we're on the same page with this. We've had this conversation many a time before. 7 games in August, potentially for some clubs. World Cup at the end of the year. Self-interest is gone ahead of the national team. It's only going to affect them.
But I sort of get that, because the clubs need to start recouping income very, very quickly. I mean, we haven't yet talked about perhaps some of the reasons behind Darryl Powell's impending departure from Castleford, but a lot of them will be economically driven. It won't be about whether Darryl's a good coach. It won't be about whether Castleford are going to win the league. They are running out of money. Darryl is a very ambitious coach. He knows that some of his senior players are out of contract at the end of this year. He will have gone to the board and said, what guarantees have I got that the players that I need to replace those that are leaving, the resource is going to be there? And it isn't there. And that's not, again, highlighting anything that Castleford are going through that any other club isn't. That is the state of the world that we're in. So if the clubs say we have to have 25 games and we're prepared to come back from having 29, you have to go with that. The clubs that will ride that August are the ones, going back to what we said earlier, have the best juniors and the greatest depth of squad. They will be the ones that are playing in the grand final, and that actually won't affect our World Cup chances. But what we need to do is say, let's not get into this situation again. The balance between the national side being the top of the pyramid, and that's where maybe all these discussions start about where we need clubs, how we develop new talent. The whole Gavin Henson story, disappointingly written up today about he failed in his first game, should actually be more about, is he the tip of a potential talent iceberg in Wales? And how do we exploit that? And until we start thinking away from a result or a fixture list to actually what the strategy is behind it, then, you mentioned earlier quite rightly Ratto and Largo. And the great thing about Hull and even West Wales this week is that they're taking players from the British Army. It's a new untapped source that we haven't done properly. The student game is probably, again, the most underdeveloped area, not only in terms of potential players, but future leaders of industry that have either played or watched or been captivated by our game as students, that we haven't got a strategy as to how to bring those people into the sport. Development academies, hats off to Castleford for saying they're going to have one in the Midlands at the moment, but we had a Midlands Academy. We couldn't make that work with central distribution. We had one in the northeast. Again, hindsight being a wonderful thing. What we haven't done in London, and Ron will know this better than anybody else, and it was highlighted again with our discussion with the scholars, is the last 25 years there's been some wonderful development work going into London, but none of it's been coordinated. Now, we sat at Wembley, however many years ago it was, watching Howard of Effingham School in Surrey, blow Castleford Academy away, and that should have been a turning point. Somebody should have said, absolutely, these kids, we need to keep them in the sport. The next thing they're going to do is that they're going to go to the Harlequins Academy. From the Harlequins Academy, they're going to play for London Scholars. For London Scholars, they're going to play for London Broncos. London Broncos may well be an established Super League team by then. So that they've got aspirations. There's a South of England regional development squad. They're going to play in the Academy League. Now, we talked to the Scholars about women. What do we do with the women's game in London? It's a fledgling thing at the moment. It should be playing in the Super League as a representative side. Now, all of those things don't cost a huge amount of money. They're just an integrated strategy policy, which we're still talking about 25 years after the original concept was given to us.
Yeah, and what frustrates a lot of rugby league people in London is the fact that all the development work, all the fantastic guys who with huge potential playing in our academy are the tip of the iceberg. That's because it's only so much two professional clubs can do in London. It's a big area. London isn't just about playing at Twickenham. There's a whole lot of disenfranchised athletic guys, mainly from Black African Caribbean nations, but also there's a huge potential around some of the Balkan nations that have communities in London. I know you've got Michaela Aletsky in Leeds, but he's just a tip of an iceberg. And these guys are big, strong, tough guys that are really suited to rugby league. But it just takes vision, it takes a plan, and just a modest amount of resource to bring them forward. I get really frustrated when people tell me, we don't have the pool of players anymore. No, you don't have the pool of players in Lancashire and Yorkshire. There's plenty of potential players out there, in Wales in particular, and in London, but they just don't know about rugby league.
It's not the plan. The plan existed under Framing the Future, if you ever get the chance to read it. There are various people that have put forward options as to how to take this game forward. It's time. Part of it is money. There has to be an allocation of resource to make these kinds of things happen. But it's time. And the one thing we have got wrong consistently is if it doesn't work today, we'll change it tomorrow. Yes. We've done it on structure. We've done it on, we talk about the reserve league. There's no need for it. Well, actually, there's probably a need for some of it, but not all of it. That links with the community game. That there is now a chasm now between players being produced. At what age do they need to be in a professional system if they're going to make it at the top? All of that is stuff that we have discussed. The classic example, and Carol will know this. Carol will know this better than anybody. Is Gateshead. The whole Gateshead Hull merger had to happen to preserve Hull. Hull would have been preserved. There are people that would have taken Hull and made sure that name carried on, even if it had to start again at the bottom of Division 1 at the time or League One, whatever it might have been. But we absolutely sacrificed Gateshead. And yet here we are, who in one season were one place off the playoffs. And you look at the team that they had and the names that they had playing for them and the coach that they had coaching them. 25 years on, we're talking about starting a World Cup in Newcastle. We're talking about promoting the Thunder to the Championship because they've got great potential. Well, we've done it all. We just had never done it for long enough.
Yes. I nearly did the same to Sheffield as well.
I will, however, say that don't forget we did actually try to drop down the league.
And it would have. But what I'm saying is,
drop down the league, but it was voted out thanks to a certain bitter ex-Rovers chairman. Go into that.
What I'm saying is the plans have existed. They've always existed, but the will to make them strategic over time. Which may involve even looking at things like traditional promotion and relegation to give clubs the opportunity to develop. And, whatever you think of Catalan, and the contribution they make, the reason they have never been out of Super League is because they were given 3 years to establish themselves in Super League.
And that's the problem.
I'm going to say the same.
Gates said, we're in Super League too soon.
Yeah.
Whatever. We can argue about every club, but the central philosophy behind it is we do not give enough time to the strategy we do have to see it properly implemented.
Why is that, Phil? Why is it? Because it's a recurring theme. Why is it?
The Exiles are back. Speaking of.
Well, I think you'll find the other nationalities from the 1950s are back.
The British Empire 13.
Because, I don't know, because clubs have always had too much power. And the clubs that are powerful at the time decisions are made are the ones that tend to determine the strategy that we go down for any particular time. Again, we've spoken about it on this programme, and I probably go back more than any of you, sadly. That's what this grey is. But in the early to mid-1970s, the game was as near on its knees as it could be. And the clubs had the least amount of power I have ever known them having. And within 10 years of allowing some people who were just given almost carte blanche to keep the clubs going but move the game forward, we had recognisable names in the national media. We had 70,000 watching Great Britain at Wembley. We had the Challenge Cup reinvigorated and you know, the National Stadium was full that day. We were moving into new sponsorship areas. The game changed over a relatively short period of time. And then when the clubs got powerful again on the back of that, they decided what direction it was going in. And that's where, it's not the only answer. It's too complicated to say that's why it happens all the time. But that's one of the reasons why it happens all the time.
What about the missed opportunity in 1995? To me, that was a once-in-a-generation opportunity. That won't come along again. I'd be amazed if it does. And where we are now.
It will come along again, because I think the wheel is moving in that direction now, that if corporate finance is going to get involved, and I think if you get a lower television deal, you become prey then to corporate finance dictating a little bit more the terms of their entry, and you become a little more susceptible to having to allow them in, then they will tell you what they want. And while the piper calls the tune.
Yeah. And what I like about that is they can recruit their own strong team to make the most of their investment. And it doesn't have to be people steeped in rugby league, because actually they bear a lot of scars if you've been steeped in rugby league for a long time. Maybe, obviously, some expert opinion, but I like the idea of somebody getting hold of rugby league and moving it forward. I know we've spoken about the Hearn family, for example, but they may not be the right ones, but there is somebody who is, and corporate finance would find out who they are and recruit them properly, and empower them as well.
The other thing about that as well is that you have to be honest about your model. And we do two things really, really well, probably better than any other sport. One is we've got the athletes. And again, I even go back to the Championship Cup ties we've seen this weekend. Every player I saw play deserves the most amazing credit for the physical condition that they were in. You know, watching Bradford play Featherstone, I think that's the game I saw more of than any of the others. Featherstone looked lean and fit, and they haven't played for a year. You know, that is enormous credit, not only to the people behind the club, but the players themselves. So that's our one asset. The other asset is community. The one thing that we have retained is our links with our communities. We're in a lot of very deprived areas. We reach a lot of people that other sports can't. We've retained accessibility. And I know I've talked too much and we haven't got round to predictions yet. But the final thing I would say is that links perfectly with a full-time and a part-time sport, and how do you reconcile it? And when clubs realise that their greatest asset is in their community, and they don't have to be at the top table to have a huge impact and be rewarded for that, and have something to play for that is meaningful in their own sphere, and the greatest possible athletes get the chance to play at the top level so that other people can appreciate how great they are, then you start getting a sport that is sustainable.
Quite so, Phil. Here.
Before we get on to the predictions, I'm not going to go through the games because it's just pointless. We'll do that when we've had some games. Matt and Karen, and I'm glad I can see you, Karen, because otherwise I thought you were Jodie Cunningham or someone. Because all women sound alike. That the very strong St Helens accent you've got.
Is that dodgy Hull accent?
Oh no!
And having a go at Martin Sadler there, would you?
No. He's coming on one day, isn't he, Phil?
Yeah, he wants to. He said he's happy to.
So, yeah, he's a good bloke, Martin.
We might let him on one day. Is there anything else you want to bring up before we go? Because we are going to go this time because we've got another show to record.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just fantastic to have it back, and I'm hoping, because there was times last year where we weren't sure if we'd even survive. It's just been such an awful year, and let's hopefully come out the other side, and fingers crossed in 2 or 3 months actually be there at the games and finally start seeing everybody in person again.
Okay. For me, I don't know what you feel about this, guys, but I'm worried in case there's an overreaction if the TV money deal isn't quite what it was before, and what will have to be cut in order to, cut your cloth accordingly. And I'm concerned about that. And I feel that would lead to an air of pessimism, and, that's not great for the game. I want to see the game thriving, but it's only going to thrive if it projects a bright, dynamic, exciting image that we know it can deliver. And we've spoken a lot about why hasn't it delivered.
I think looking at the first week's fixtures, one of them clearly was planned and one wasn't, but we've got 2 immensely intriguing games. You've got Hull and Huddersfield, the battle of the new coaches. I'm really looking forward to who will mastermind a first up victory, because they will look very different, both of those teams this year, and you always do play in the image of the guy who's in charge, and I can't wait for that. I think the other one is Warrington and Castleford, which is the battle of the 2 teams who won't have coaches. And again, one of them is going to be under weekly pressure if they don't deliver, because they know what's happening at the end of it. So I have no idea who's going to win any games this year, but all I would say is Saints are still the team to catch, that they're not any weaker than they were, and they have got some fantastic kids who have had a taste of first team rugby, and I think that's what will sustain them. And I wouldn't be surprised, and of course this is not a unique or novel thought because I think everybody's saying the same thing, if they do end up doing a 3-peat.
I think Wigan are more or less exactly the same.
Yeah, I'd put Wigan in with that as well. I think Wigan and Saints both haven't really had many changes. I think I think they'll carry on.
Wigan have got Bateman in there as well.
Yeah.
Is it Jai Field in there as well?
Jackson Hastings back yet?
Yes. He's back.
Bevan French not back yet, though.
He's the one I don't want to come back, to be honest. He's the bigger threat. Yeah. I'd be quite happy with that.
Do Wigan have a point to prove this year after the grand final? Is that that must be rankling with them? Something really, really deep inside.
To
might motivate them to do well.
Yeah, definitely. However amazing an ending it was, it must hurt to lose in that manner.
No, and I think that will stir them up. I think that will bring them on to tough games.
Yeah.
Saints to do the double, men's and women's Super League. just to throw that, especially if you look at. I tell you what, those opening fixtures in the women's Super League, they are. I know we're supposed to be positive, but they are absolute shockers in terms of there is none of those games I would want to show to the world outside because they're not competitive. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to anyone, but that is they are shockers. They are shockers.
Are they doing what Super League are doing? I know that we don't play Rovers until the summer. Are they doing it so that the big games, hopefully, fans can come back in?
But with the number of, fans who go to watch those games, and we hope they get bigger, of course, I think that's an irrelevance. I think you've got to kick off the season with a big fixture because there's going to be some big scorelines there, because if we go by the theory that the England team have been training for the last 12 months and that the England team is mainly made up of Saints, Wigan, Leeds and Castleford players, they're going to be much more ready for action than any of the other teams who have had their training cut off.
It goes back to, again, strategy in the broadest sense of the word. There's been criticism in Australia that they've only got 4 NRLW teams. But look at the standard of the Gillaroos. All the best players playing a short, heightened season. And not only are sponsors desperate to get involved, but the crowd wants to watch all of those matches. We've gone for participation is the most important thing. So just get as many people in playing as we can and then elevate them as quickly as we can to have a competition that is slightly unbalanced. Well, we've got that in Super League. We've got that in the Championship. We've got that in League One. We've now got it in the women's game. It's nobody's fault. It's just, what do we want to be? And if you want to put the international game, the absolute pinnacle, you want the best playing the best every week to give you the finest possible chance of being top of the world, you have to look at perhaps maybe having 6 women's teams in a Super League, which is genuinely super, and an aspiring pathway through for the others.
I feel almost guilty for saying that. People are going to take it the wrong way, but if you want to provide the best image to the world outside, you don't want to see blowout scorelines that could happen. You want to see close games. And of course, people moaning about Widnes beating West Wales by 50 points or whatever. Featherstone and Bradford are in the same division, and Featherstone easily dispatched them in the end. It can happen. But if you set up matches that are close or close on paper, they're more likely to be close in games which aren't. But
what, you mean every minute matters?
Every minute matters. I mean, I'll watch them anyway, but I'm not everyone, and we're not everyone. More's the pity. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, actually. Should everyone be like us?
No.
No.
What you want is other people to get it, though, don't you? Yeah. See what makes people passionate about this.
Diamonds or cubic zirconia. I don't know what we are or what we could be, but we could be anything. We could be anything.
Earnest debate of differing opinions brings change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as long as we don't make the next Super League chief executive the Gerald Ratner of the sport, then we'll be okay. poor old Gerald. Although there are parts of our sport that are a load of crap, but you can work out for yourself at home.
Are we having predictions?
No, because we've run out of time. And Matt won't tell us his predictions anyway. So we will say goodbye, and because me and Phil have got to do another call now. We're too busy today. It's all these podcasts.
Working hard.
Well, what work suggests many various things. Ron, Karen, Matt, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
And we'll have to do this again sometime because it's actually worked, which is a positive. And of course, if we do these things on Zoom, we don't have to invite people to our studio, which we don't do great on washing the studio.
Well, I don't have to do the washing up then, which is even better.
We can keep all the biscuits for ourselves. That is the main thing.
And I don't have to travel up to Yorkshire. How good is that?
That's also. And on that bombshell, we say enjoy the return of Rugby League, and we'll see you again later this week because we're doing another show now. But thanks for watching and listening.
Right.
And
thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.